Hi, I'm Bobby Russell. I'm a Microsoft technical trainer. I'm here to walk you through the SC200 Microsoft Security Operations Analyst course. And with that, welcome to Learning Path 9, where we'll look at creating detections and performing investigations using Microsoft Sentinel. In this learning path, we'll cover threat detection with Microsoft Sentinel Analytics. We'll look at using automation within Sentinel. We'll look at responding to threats using Microsoft Sentinel playbooks. We'll look at security incident management within Sentinel. We'll look at user entity behavior analytics. We'll look at how do we normalize data within Sentinel. And finally, how do we perform queries, visualizations, and monitor data within Microsoft Sentinel. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into our first module, which is threat detection with Microsoft Sentinel Analytics. After completing this module, you'll be able to explain the importance of Microsoft Sentinel Analytics. You'll be able to explain the different types of analytics rules that are out there. You'll be able to create rules from templates. You'll be able to create new analytics rules and queries using the Analytics Rule Wizard. And finally, you'll be able to manage rules with various modifications. So let's take a look at how Microsoft Sentinel Analytics enhances threat detection. It ingests data from a wide range of sources and applies analytics rules to identify correlation and anomalies, essentially flagging behaviors that align with known malicious tactics. These rules are customizable, enabling your SOC to receive timely alerts about potential incidents. Common use cases include spotting compromised accounts, detecting insider threats, and analyzing network traffic for signs of data exfiltration or some type of suspicious user behavior. Here we have a breakdown of the 7 types of analytics rules available in Microsoft Sentinel. Each is designed to address different detection needs, starting with Microsoft Security and Fusion rules, which leverage native signals and correlation logic. We also have machine learning-based behavior analytics that identifies subtle patterns in users or entity behavior. We have threat intelligence and anomaly rules that help surface emerging threats and deviations from baselines, while schedule and near real-time rules provide flexibility in how and when detections are triggered. This layered approach ensures comprehensive coverage across both known and unknown threat vectors. Here we have a breakdown of the 7 types of analytics rules available in Microsoft Sentinel. Each is designed to address different detection needs. Starting with Microsoft Security and Fusion rules, which leverage native signals and correlation logic. We also have machine learning-based behavior analytics that identifies subtle patterns in user or entity behavior. Threat intelligence and anomaly rules help surface emerging threats and deviations from baselines, while scheduled and near real-time rules provide flexibility in how and when detections are triggered. This layered approach ensures comprehensive coverage across both known and unknown threat vectors. Here, we're looking at how Microsoft Sentinel streamlines threat detection using pre-built analytics rule templates. These templates, sourced from Sentinel GitHub repository, allow you to quickly deploy rules that align with known attacks, tactics, and techniques. This interface shown highlights key attributes like severity, MITRE attack tactics and techniques, and data sources, making it easy to prioritize and tailor detections. This setup accelerates rule creation while ensuring alignment with industry-standard threat models. This image walks us through the process of creating a highly customized analytics rule in Microsoft Sentinel using the Schedule Query Rule Wizard. It allows you to define your own KQL logic, configure how often your query runs, and even link automated responses through Sentinel playbooks. The interface supports entity mapping and includes a testing feature to validate your rule against current data before you deploy it. This level of flexibility is ideal for tailoring decisions to your specific environment and operational needs. Ongoing management of analytics rules is essential to reduce alert fatigue and ensure high-fidelity threat detection. By continuously tuning these rules security teams can filter out noise and focus on the most critical signals. Microsoft Sentinel provides visibility into rules, severity, tactics, and operational status, enabling informed decisions about which rules to enable, disable, or even refine. This proactive approach helps maintain an effective and responsive security operations environment. Microsoft Sentinel's anomaly detection rules use machine learning and behavior analytics to surface unusual activity without immediately triggering alerts or incidents. These anomalies are stored in a dedicated table and later correlated with other signals to strengthen threat detection logic. This approach supports proactive threat hunting by identifying subtle patterns that may indicate malicious behavior. Analysts can also leverage flighting mode for testing and adjusting thresholds to fine-tune detection sensitivity. Let's jump into our second module, automation in Microsoft Sentinel. After completing this module, you'll be able to explain automation options in Microsoft Sentinel, and you'll also be able to create automation rules. Microsoft Sentinel offers a robust automation capability through its SOAR framework, streamlining repetitive and predictable tasks for your Security Operations Center. Automation rules serve as a centralized mechanism to manage how incidents are handled, ensuring consistent and efficient responses. Playbooks complement this by orchestrating a series of predefined actions and logic, enabling automated enrichment, response, and remediation workflows. These tools not only reduce manual workload, but also accelerate incident resolution and improve operational consistency. Integrating automation into your detection and response strategy is key to scaling security operations effectively. Automation rules in Microsoft Sentinel streamline incident management by enabling consistent and efficient handling of alerts. You can automatically change the status of an incident to reflect its lifecycle stage, helping teams track progress in real time. Adjusting severity levels ensures that high-impact threats are prioritized appropriately. Assigning incidents to specific owners promotes accountability, while tagging incidents supports better organization and faster correlation during investigations. These rules are essential for scaling operations and maintaining clarity in a high-volume environment. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into our third module, where we'll look at threat response within Microsoft Sentinel using playbooks. After completing this module, you'll be able to explain Microsoft Sentinel's SOAR capabilities. You'll be able to understand Microsoft playbooks, and you'll be able to create a playbook to automate an alert or an incident response. And finally, you'll be able to run a playbook on demand or as part of an automatic response within Sentinel. Microsoft Sentinel supports scalable automation through a combination of playbook templates and Azure Logic App connectors. Playbook templates provide pre-built workflows that can be quickly deployed to automate threat response actions. Managed connectors serve as the foundational component, enabling playbooks to interact with a wide range of Microsoft as well as third-party services. For more specialized integrations, custom connectors allow teams to define their own triggers and actions, extending automation to virtually any service. This flexibility empowers security teams to tailor their response strategies to fit unique operational requirements. Microsoft Sentinel functions as both a SIEM, which is a security information and event management service, and a SOAR solution, SOAR being security orchestration and automated response. And this enables automated incident response through tightly integrated playbooks. These playbooks are built on Azure Logic Apps, which allow you to define workflows that execute automatically when specific alerts are triggered. Logic Apps use connectors to interface with various services, while triggers and actions define the conditions and tasks within each workflow. The Microsoft Sentinel Logic Apps connector specifically enables these playbooks to interact directly with Sentinel alerts and your incidents. This architecture supports scalable, automated security operations that reduce manual effort and will accelerate your response times. The Logic App Designer in Microsoft Sentinel enables the creation of automated workflows by chaining together triggers and actions on a visual canvas. In the example you see here, the workflow begins with a Sentinel alert trigger, which captures incident data without requiring additional configuration. The next step retrieves detailed incident information using the Get Incident action, scoped to a specific subscription, resource group, and workspace. And finally, the workflow includes a communication step, such as posting a message which can be used to notify teams or systems. This setup demonstrates how seamlessly Sentinel integrates with Logic Apps to support your automated incident response needs. Playbooks in Microsoft Sentinel can be executed in two primary ways, offering you flexibility in how responses are triggered. The first method is manual execution, where an analyst runs the playbook directly from an incident, allowing for targeted case-by-case responses. The second method is automation through analytics rules, enabling playbooks to run automatically when specific detection criteria are met. This dual approach supports both reactive as well as proactive security operations. It ensures that teams can respond quickly while also scaling their response capabilities through automation capabilities. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into our fourth module where we'll build on this. And in our fourth module, we'll look at security incident management in Microsoft Sentinel. After completing this module, you'll be able to explain Microsoft Sentinel incident management. We're going to explore evidence and entity management. And finally, we're going to investigate and manage incident resolution. Incident management in Microsoft Sentinel provides a centralized view for tracking and responding to security threats across your environment. Analysts can filter and prioritize incidents based on severity, type, and alert count, enabling efficient triage and response. Each incident includes detailed metadata such as associated tactics from the MITRE ATT&CK framework, related entities, and ownership status. The interface supports both high-level monitoring and deep dive investigation, helping teams maintain situational awareness and streamline their response workflows. This structure ensures that critical threats are addressed promptly and consistently. Understanding evidence and entities in Microsoft Sentinel involves working with several core components that structure and contextualize security data. Events are raw data points collected from various sources, forming the foundation for analysis. Alerts are generated when specific patterns or anomalies are detected within those events, signaling potential threats. Entities represent the key objects involved, things like users, IP addresses, or devices, helping to map relationships and impact. Incidents aggregate related alerts into a single case for investigation, while bookmarks allow analysts to flag and preserve important data points for deeper analysis or future reference. In Microsoft 365 Defender, incident reports provide a comprehensive breakdown of multi-stage attacks, such as those involving initial access and discovery on a single endpoint. Each incident is enriched with detailed context, including associated entities like registry keys, file path, file hashes, and user accounts. This structured view allows analysts to trace the attack chain and understand how different components are linked. Tabs like Overview, Logs, Task, and Activity Log support deeper investigation and response planning. By correlating these events, security teams can more effectively assess impact and take targeted remediation actions whenever needed. Incident management in Microsoft Sentinel gives security teams a centralized view to detect, investigate, and respond to threats efficiently. It brings together related alerts into a single incident, providing context like severity, tactics used, and involved entities, all in a single place. This helps analysts quickly assess the situation, prioritize their actions, and streamline their response workflows. In the example you see here, we have a multi-stage incident involving initial access and discovery on a single endpoint and is currently under investigation, marked with a medium severity level and actively assigned to an administrator. The investigation dashboard provides a timeline of suspicious activities, including PowerShell downloads, file executions, and command line behavior, all occurring within a tight time window. These events are visually mapped in a network graph, helping analysts understand the relationship and progression of the attack. This structured view enables rapid correlation of events and supports efficient root cause analysis. By leveraging the timeline and visual context, security teams can prioritize response actions and contain threats a lot more effectively. So now, let's go ahead and jump into our fifth module, which we're going to discuss user entity behavior analytics within Microsoft Sentinel. After completing this module, you'll be able to explain user and entity behavior analytics in Sentinel, as well as be able to explore entities in Microsoft Sentinel. User and Entity Behavior Analytics, or UEBA, is a security technology that uses machine learning and advanced analytics to detect abnormal behavior by users and entities, things like devices, applications, or servers, within your organization. Instead of relying solely on known attack signatures, UEBA builds a baseline of normal activity for each user and entity, then flags deviations that could indicate threats, such as a compromised account, insider attacks, or maybe even lateral movement. Entity Behavior Analytics in Microsoft Sentinel starts by ingesting raw data from both SaaS applications and on-premise systems. This data is processed by the UEBA agent, which applies behavior analytics, identity context, peer comparison, and access patterns to detect anomalies. By correlating this information with user and group data from Microsoft Entra ID, the system builds a rich behavior profile for each entity. This approach enables the detection of subtle, high-risk activities that might otherwise go unnoticed. It's a powerful way to enhance threat detection by focusing on deviations from normal behavior rather than relying solely on known attack signatures. So for this, start by identifying an incident that involves a specific user, device, or entity of interest. From there, you can search for that entity or select it directly from the incident details page to begin a focused investigation. The investigation process allows you to analyze related alerts, behaviors, and contextual data, helping to build a clearer picture of the entity's activity. You can also bookmark key findings for future reference or correlation. The final step is reviewing the entity behavior page, which consolidates all relevant alerts and activities into a single timeline for deeper analysis. When you encounter an entity in a search, an alert, or in an investigation, you can select the entity in the investigation and select the entity to select information and view full details, and be taken to that entity page. A data sheet full of useful information about that entity is provided. This provides types of information that you'll find on the page, which include things like basic facts about the entity, a timeline of notable events related to the entity, and insights about the entity's behavior. Now keep in mind, not all entities may have full details. So with that, we're going to dive right into our sixth module. Our sixth module is going to be talking about data normalization within Microsoft Sentinel. After you've completed this module, you'll be able to understand what data normalization is. You'll understand what an ASIM parser is, which is still in preview. You'll be able to understand parameterized KQL functions. You'll be able to create an ASIM parser. And finally, you'll be able to configure Azure Monitor data collection rules. So first, begin by detecting data from a wide range of sources: cloud services, on-prem systems, and third-party platforms to ensure comprehensive visibility. The next step is to make the content source agnostic so that analytics and detection rules can operate consistently regardless of where the data originated. Unifying parsers then standardize the data into a normalized format, enabling seamless integration across the platform. Support for customer sources is essential, allowing organizations to bring in unique or proprietary data formats. And then finally, the entire process is designed with the ease of use in mind, so security teams can focus on detection and response rather than data formatting. This approach ensures scalable, efficient, and a consistent threat detection across your entire diverse environment. When working with Microsoft Sentinel, ASIM parsers allow you to query data in a normalized format by replacing raw table names with standardized parsers. This approach ensures consistency across data sources by using unifying parsers that align all incoming logs to a common schema. For authentication-related data, use the IAM authentication parser to standardize fields like user, IP address, and result. DNS queries can be normalized using the IAM DNS parser, making it easier to correlate across different DNS sources. For process-related events, apply both IAM process create and IAM process terminate to capture lifecycle activity. This method simplifies query development and enhances cross-source detection and analytics. Creating KQL queries is simple. You start by opening the query editor in your Microsoft Sentinel workspace and writing your KQL query, inserting placeholders for any parameters you want to define. Once your query is ready, select the option to save it as a function. In the Save dialog, assign a clear and descriptive name to the function and, if applicable, choose a legacy category for the organization. Define each parameter by specifying its type, such as a string or date time, and set the default values to streamline your overall usage. After saving, the function becomes reusable, allowing you to call it with different parameter values across various queries for consistent and efficient analysis. To run a parameterized KQL function in Microsoft Sentinel, start by navigating to the Functions tab in your workspace. Select the function you want to use, such as Azure Activity by Category, and provide the required parameters, like a specific timestamp and a category value. In this case, the function is executed with a date-time input and a category filter set to administrative. Once the parameters are set, run the query to retrieve the filter results. The output is displayed in a structured table, which makes it easy to analyze and identify any relevant activity tasks. Here is the custom ASIM parser dev process. Start by collecting sample logs to understand the structure and content of the data you're working with. Once you have a clear view of the data, identify the appropriate ASIM schema that aligns with the use case. Map the fields from your source events to the fields defined in the schema. Then develop one or more custom ASIM parsers based on that mapping. After development, thoroughly test the parser to ensure they normalize data accurately and consistently. Once validated, deploy the parsers into your Microsoft Sentinel workspace, update any relevant unifying parsers, and consider contributing your work back to the community to support a broader adaptation and improvement. So, start by defining your data sources, which includes service-to-service connections, the Azure Monitor Agent, or API-based connectors. These sources feed into your Log Analytics workspace, where data collection rules manage how data is processed. Depending on the type, standard or custom logs, data can undergo ingestion time transformation using either predefined workloads or the data collection rule-based custom logs API. Once transformed, the data is routed to Microsoft Sentinel workspaces. There, it's stored in either standard or custom tables, ready for use in your analytics detection and your investigation workflows. All right, so we've come a long way, so we're going to jump into our final module, which is query, visualize, and monitor data in Microsoft Sentinel. After completing this module, you'll be able to visualize security data using Microsoft Sentinel workbooks, as well as you'll learn how to create workbooks in Microsoft Sentinel. Microsoft Sentinel workbooks are interactive dashboards that allow you to visualize and analyze your security data in real time. They provide a flexible canvas where you can bring together data from multiple sources, such as Entra ID, Microsoft Defender, and custom logs, into a rich visualizations like chart, graph, or table. Workbooks can be used for monitoring threat hunting, incident investigation, and reporting. You can start with pre-built templates, or you can create your own from scratch, customizing them with KQL queries, filters, and parameters to suit your specific use case. They support collaboration by allowing you to share insights across teams, making them a powerful tool for both operational visibility and strategic decision-making in your Security Operations Center, or SOC. So you start by navigating to the Workbook section in Microsoft Sentinel. Once inside, select the data sources you want to visualize. These can include alerts from Entra ID, Microsoft Defender, your Office 365, Advanced Threat Protection, and many more. Customize the layout by adding charts, metrics, and filters that align with your security monitoring goals. After configuring your visuals in Logic, save the workbook and share it with your team to support collaboration and threat analysis. This approach enables real-time visibility into your security posture through an interactive dashboard-style experience. To create a new workbook in Microsoft Sentinel, start by going to the Workbook section and selecting Add Workbook to launch a blank canvas. Click Edit to begin customizing or to add text, KQL queries, and parameters to tailor your workbook to your monitoring needs. When building queries, ensure the data source is set to logs, the resource type is set to log analytics, and select the appropriate workspace. Once your design is complete, save the workbook under the same subscription and resource group as your Sentinel workspace. Choose Shared Reports if you want others in your organization to access it, or My Reports to keep it private. To switch between workbooks, use the Open option in the toolbar to browse and select from any of your existing ones that you have. Now that we've completed this learning path, feel free to watch some of these topics demonstrated in the following labs.
Welcome to our next lab demonstration. In this demonstration, we're going to look at creating detections and perform investigations using Microsoft Sentinel. So we're going to do quite a few demonstrations as part of this here. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at modifying Microsoft security rules. So we talked in our presentation about Microsoft security rules. So let's kind of walk through this process in order to do this. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up an Azure portal. And in our Azure portal, we're going to go ahead and log in here. And if you're following along, use your own personal credentials or lab credentials as far as this part is concerned here. We're going to put in our password. And I'm going to save the password because it's lab environment. We're only going to be using it temporarily here. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go to this Microsoft Sentinel page. And if you just type in Sentinel in your search bar, you do have the ability to do it. I do have a workspace already created. If you do not have a workspace in Sentinel deployed already, look at the previous modules video, and in there we walk you through this. But what we're going to do is we're going to take our existing Sentinel deployment here, and we're going to go in and we're going to go through setting up analytics rules. We'll talk a little bit about what those rules are and so forth. So to get started, what we're going to do is on the far left side here in our navigation window, we're going to go to Analytics. So we're going to scroll down here and you'll see the option for Analytics. Within the Analytics area, we're going to create a new Analytics rule. So there are 3 different types of rules that can be created here. The first rule is a scheduled query rule. And what this means is the rule will run on a schedule, on an hourly, daily, or even weekly schedule, depending on how you have it configured. The second rule we have is an NRT rule, which is a near real-time rule. If you use a near real-time rule, it runs every 2 minutes. There's no scheduling. It just runs automatically every 2 minutes. And then the final rule we have is a Microsoft incident creation rule. And what this allows us to do, if we set this rule up, it allows us to take incidents that are created or activities that are created in other Defender products and so forth, and have it automatically create an incident here within our Sentinel. So those are the 3 different options that we have as far as this. So we're going to go and we're going to create a Microsoft incident rule here. And we're going to fill in some pertinent information as part of this here. So for this rule, what we're going to do is we're going to say that we're going to create an incident based on Defender for Cloud. So if something occurs in Defender for Cloud, we want an incident to be created within Sentinel for that. Typically, you put a description in here if you want a description. We're going to leave that blank for now. We do want to enable it. You do have the ability to disable it, which basically you can pre-stage it and you can always turn it on later. But we're going to go ahead and enable it. And then for the service itself, again, we're going to be looking for Microsoft Defender for Cloud. So we're looking for instances of things occurring in Defender for Cloud. And if they occur, depending on what we're looking for, it will create that rule, that incident for us here in Sentinel. So that's going to be the primary purpose of this. Now, what we're going to do is instead of getting everything, we're going to do a filter. And we're going to filter based on certain levels. And we're going to do low, medium, or high. So what I don't want is an incident to be created in Sentinel if Defender just creates an informational alert. So I don't want an incident created for that. But if it's a low, medium, or high event, then yes, I do want it to create it in there. You can even add more filtering in here if you want to, but we're going to keep all of that, the defaults. We're going to go next to the automated response. Now, later on, we'll talk more about this, but if an alert occurs in Defender and it creates an incident in Sentinel, do I want Sentinel to automatically respond to that event? But for now, we're not. We're just going to go ahead and create this. We're going to go ahead and save it. And now we've got our new rule created, which you'll see right here, the create incidents based on Defender for Cloud. So now we've got an instance of that occurring. So that is how you import alerts that occur or things that occur within another Microsoft product, one of our Defender products in this case. And just to give you an idea, let's take a look at the settings here. Here are all the different places that you can pull alerts from. So Defender for Cloud Apps, Defender for Cloud, which we just did, Defender for Identity, Entra ID Protection, Defender for Endpoint, IoT, Defender for Office, Insider Risk, or if you want to, you can create your own custom one. So that's how you create or how you configure alerts or events that occur in other Defender products to be imported into Sentinel as part of this process. So that's the first process that we have. Hopefully you enjoy that. Now, let's take this a step further. And if you remember in the demonstration we just did, it's going to generate an alert, but there was an automated response option where I can have it respond in the event of something occurring. So how do we set up those automated responses, the structure, the workflow for that? And that's what we're going to look at now in our second demonstration, which is creating a playbook in Microsoft Sentinel. Now, keep in mind, playbooks are basically automated responses if something occurs. The way that I like to explain playbooks, and I love American football, is if you ever watch American football, let's say professional or at the college level, normally there's a coach of some sort, a head coach or someone on the sideline with a notepad or a laminated piece of paper that has a listing of all the plays that his team can play. And normally they'll have them organized based on different scenarios. Like if they're close to scoring, they're going to run these plays. If they're far away from scoring, they're going to run these plays and so forth. So based on scenarios, there's a list of plays that they can run. If they're on defense, the same thing. So think of a Sentinel playbook as something very similar. If something occurs, I want the system to automatically respond to that, or I may want to create a workflow where someone can trigger a response. And based on certain scenarios, kind of like a football coach. So that's what we're going to look at now. Is we're going to go in and we're going to look at how to do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to go in, and in this case here, we're going to go to our Content Hub, and within our Content Hub, we're going to look at Sentinel SOAR Essentials. So we're going to bring this up here and filter based off of that. And there we go. So Sentinel SOAR Essentials gives you a lot of different capabilities here. So we're going to take this and we're going to go ahead and run this. Now it's already installed. As you can see here, we've already pre-installed it. So you don't, if it's not installed, you would first install it, and then you would go in and manage, select the option to manage. And within manage, you get all of these different capabilities. Now keep in mind, what we're looking at here are SOAR, Security, Orchestration, and Automated Response. So we're looking for pre-built response capabilities. So if you install this, you have the ability to do that. So what we're going to do in this case here is we're going to look for specific ones that we want. In this case here, we're going to look for the Defender XDR ransom playbook for SecOps tasks. So that's what we're going to be looking for, which is this one here. So we're going to select this one and we're going to set it up. So within here, what we're going to do is we're going to go in and we're going to configure this to be used within our environment. So we're going to go ahead and select it here, and then we're going to look at the option here on the bottom right to create a playbook from this. So now when we create this playbook, we have to store it somewhere. So we specify the subscription and the resource group. The region's already pre-populated. If you want to change the name, you can, but normally keeping the default names is perfectly fine. So what we want to do in this case here is we're going to go in and we're going to just remove the 4. So we're going to say Defender XDR ransomware playbook, SecOps tasks. So that's what we're going to do for that. And the main reason for that is there is a character limitation. So if you notice here, if I add additional stuff, it does give me an error because it does have a 64 character limitation. So that's important. So at this point, we're going to select connections. And here we're going to define, where is it going to connect to? So in this case, we're going to use Sentinel. So then we're going to review, and then we're going to create this playbook. If you notice here, I'm getting an error. The length is still a little bit too much. So let's go back in here and let's remove, we'll remove the tasks piece. We'll just do that. And let's go ahead and create it. So there you go. So remember that 64 character limit is very important as part of this process. So let's wait for this to install. Okay, so now our deployment has completed. It has succeeded at this point. So we have our playbook here, the Defender XDR ransomware playbook for SecOps that we have. At this point, it's available to use. Notice here that it did open up our Logic App page because a playbook is nothing more than a Logic App. That's all it is. So when we create or edit playbooks, we're actually creating or editing a Logic App. So there's our playbook. And at this point, we could use that playbook when we start getting into analytics rules, when we get into automation for generating response in case events occur. We can also use those playbooks when it comes to addressing incidents that we may have, which will demonstrate the incident creation process and so forth as part of the course here. So now you see how to create a playbook. Now let's look at how do we update a playbook. So what we're going to do for updating our playbooks is we're going to go back in here within our workspace. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at our active playbooks. So within automation, we're going to go to active playbooks here, and you'll see all the current running playbooks. And here's the playbook that we just deployed as part of that. Now, to edit the playbook, it's fairly simple. You would select the playbook itself. And then from here, again, this is going to take us to our Logic App page. Within our Logic App page, we then have the ability to go in and make a change to that. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go in and we're going to pull up the Logic App Designer. And here is the playbook that we currently have. So what's going to happen is when an incident is created within Sentinel, we're going to initialize a variable, which is the alert title. And then there's a for each loop that occurs for an alert, and then a condition that occurs in that case. So this is the workflow that we're going to use as part of this. So what we're going to do is we're going to manipulate this a little bit to edit it, if you will. So we're going to select the Microsoft Sentinel incident. And you'll notice here that you do have some configuration options that you can set up as part of this here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go in and we're going to select the option to change the connection. And in here, what we're going to do is we're going to add a new connection. And then when we add that new connection, what it's going to ask us here is how we want to authenticate. So in this case here, you have OAuth, Service Principal, Managed Identity. We're going to use OAuth, and then we're going to use the tenant ID that we're currently using, our tenant. So we're going to go ahead and sign in. And what this is going to allow is for the system to use those credentials to go in and allow access to it. So we're going to go in. I got a pop-up error here. So we're going to relaunch this here. I'm just going to hold the Shift key down. And in here, I'm going to select the account that I want to use to run this under, and it's going to authenticate. And there we go. So now I've added the connection to it. So this is how you can make sure your playbook runs properly. This one does require a credential. So now it's going to run under the context of my account whenever it does, which is important in this case to do it. So at this point, you would then save the playbook, which is essentially a Logic App here, and we're done with that. So that's the process that you would use. So now let's go ahead and create an automation rule that uses the playbook that we just created. So within Sentinel, we're going to go down to automation. And within automation, we're going to create a new automation rule. Now, notice here, there are a few other options. I can create have a playbook. So I can create playbooks from here, one that triggers based on an incident, one that triggers based on an alert is being generated, based on an entity, or I can start with a clean slate of a playbook and then build everything from scratch. But I'm going to create an automation rule for now. And the difference between an automation rule and the playbook is an automation rule runs automatically based on some event. I can create a playbook that runs automatically using an automation rule, or I can create a playbook that runs manually where I can launch the playbook as a person, if you will, a human, whenever I want to. So what we're going to do here is we're going to create an automation rule. Let's refresh here before we do this. So we're going to go ahead and create this automation rule here. So we're going to select automation rule, and we're going to give the automation rule a name. So in here, we'll just call it, in this case, store response. And again, the name, obviously make it something that's easy to understand. But then we define what happens. So in this case here, this is a workflow, remember. So with an automation rule, something has to occur. So that would be your if. If this occurs, then we do something. So there's a kind of an if-then process that occurs here. So in this case here, what we're going to do is we're going to go in and we're going to say when an incident is created. Okay, so in this case here, we're going to leave that the way it is. Where is the incident provider? So in this case, notice here, it could be Sentinel or Defender XDR. So we're going to keep everything for now, all. So when an incident is created in one of these two locations here, that's our if statement. But we're going to add another condition. So notice here, it can be an and or an or. And this is very important because if my condition is an and, that means both of these must be satisfied for the rule to kick off, for the automation rule to launch. If it's an or, then any of the conditions would have to be applied for it to run. So in this case here, we're going to do an and in here, we're going to do tactics. So for our tactics, we're going to say, okay, if the tactic contains, and then we're going to pick a few things. So if the tactic is a reconnaissance attack, an execution attack, let's say it's a persistence attack, a command and control attack, I will do data exfiltration. So if someone's trying to exfiltrate data, or a pre-attack. So if any one of those tactics, these are our MITRE tactics, are part of this. So number one, it must come from Defender XDR Sentinel, and it contains basically it's generated by any of the rules that we have, and the tactic is one of the 6 that we have listed here. So if that occurs, then what do I want to happen? This is our then process. Then I want it to run a playbook. Remember, we just created a playbook in the previous example here. And what playbook do I want to run? I can go in there, I can specify the playbook that I want to run. Now, if you notice here, it says no Microsoft Sentinel permissions. If this is the first time that you're doing this in your environment, this is normal. Because what we need Sentinel to have access. So what we're going to do is we're going to select the option here that says manage playbook permissions. And in here, we're going to give access to that resource group and we're going to apply it. So now notice it does show up here. So now here's our playbook. The one we just created is going to be launched. So to kind of walk through this, what's going to occur is if the incident provider is Sentinel or XDR, basically anything, and the analytics rule that it triggers from is any one of the ones listed here, and the tactics that are flagged as part of this are one of the 6 that we have listed here, then we're going to run a playbook. And the playbook we're going to run is the Defender XDR ransomware playbook SecOps playbook. So that's what we're going to do. And at this point, we're going to run it indefinitely. So there's no time period. You can set an expiration date if you want. By the way, you can add additional actions in here if you want also, but we're just going to keep the default action, or the one action in here now, and then we're going to save it. So now what we've done in the first lab, we created a playbook. In our second lab that we just completed here, we created an automation rule that now launches or calls that playbook. So that's the process that we currently have here at this point. So now, as we continue building on here, let's go on to the next step of this, where we're going to set up a scheduled query. So we're slowly building because the automation rule has been created, but now we need to tie it to something. So what we're going to do is we're going to create some analytics rules. And what analytics rules do is they search for specific events or sets of events across the environment. And those analytics rules are created in the analytics section. So when this occurs, you define the thresholds or the conditions that are reached, and then it'll generate an incident if you want it to. And if it generates an incident or if it is triggered, you can have it automatically respond as part of a remediation process if you want to. So that's what we're going to do in this demonstration here is we're going to walk through that process. So in order to do that, we're going to go into our Content Hub first. And in our Content Hub, we're going to pull up the Azure Activity solution. So there's our Azure Activity. It's already installed, so I'm not going to have to worry about installing it. But I am going to manage it. So I'm going to select it. And then down here, select Manage on the bottom right. This is going to open up the page for this resource from the Content Hub. And in here, what we're going to do is we're going to launch the Azure Assignment Policy Wizard. And the reason we're going to do that is because we need to configure this. So let's go in here and open up the data connector page for this specific one. We're going to open up the connector page and we're going to launch that wizard. So in our previous module, we talked about connectors and how they're configured. So for this one here, we're going to go down to the bottom and we're going to select the option to launch the wizard to set up a policy for this. So in here, we're going to define the scope. So the scope for this is going to be at the subscription level. So we're going to pick our subscription. Now you can be more granular if you want to and pick a resource group, but we're going to say this applies to everything within the subscription as part of that. You want to make sure it's enabled here at the bottom, policy enforcement. You want to make sure that's enabled. And then we're going to set up a parameter for this. And what we're going to do here is we're going to define the log analytics workspace that we're going to be monitoring here. So in this case, the workspace is going to be the Sentinel workspace that we have. So we're going to select that. And then we're going to do a remediation task. And what this is for is if the Azure activity logs are not being sent in the Sentinel. I'll give you a perfect example. Let's say you've got a bunch of activity logs, and then you decide later on to deploy the connector for activity log. In that scenario, what will happen is all Azure activity logs from that point going forward will be copied over. So notice here it says, by default, this assignment will only take effect on newly created resources. But what about those existing logs that you have? So for existing resources, by setting up this remediation task, it's not only going to update everything going forward, but it's going to go back to existing resources and update those also. So this is going to be an important thing that we want to keep in mind as part of this here. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick the geographical location where we want this, and we'll put West US here for our demonstration purposes as part of this. And then last but not least, we're going to go ahead and build this. So we're going to go ahead and create this. So now I've got a policy configured that will automatically pull all the Azure activity logs into our Sentinel workspace. So now what we need to do is we need to go in and we need to create a scheduled rule to essentially look through those logs. So what we're going to do is back on the main Sentinel page, we're going to go in and we're going to go to our analytics and we're going to set up this rule. Sentinel really gets its power, or you can leverage the power of Sentinel by creating analytics rules. This is the true power. Without analytics rules, Sentinel basically doesn't do much. It'll capture all the log data and put it into a workspace for you, but you need a process that reviews that workspace, that analyzes that workspace, and then looks for things that match. And if it matches, then Sentinel can do something, or an administrator can do something. So the analytics piece, which we're going to discuss now, is very important. So earlier we created an incident creation rule. Now we're going to create a scheduled query rule. And in here, we're going to create a scheduled query. And this scheduled query rule, what we're going to use is, and what we'll do in this case here is we'll change it up a little bit. What we're going to do is instead of building one manually, let's go ahead and let's use one of our templates. So we have a lot of templates. You'll see here rules templates that are available. And what we're going to do here, let's do this here. Let's look for a new cloud. So whenever a new Cloud Shell user is created, then I want to be notified about this. So we're going to use this rule here as part of it. And we're going to select the option to create a rule. By the way, if you notice here, if you don't see the option to create it, there's a right here on the far right, just select that. Sometimes it's slid over, but we're going to expand it and then we're going to create the rule. Now, by the way, this is a template. So the logic for the rule is already pre-built. This is using Kusto Query Language, or KQL. So we're going to go ahead and create that rule. It's already preloaded because it's a template with a lot of different things. You can change any of these based on what it is that you're looking for here. But we're going to keep all of this. We're going to look at the logic. Here is the query. So Sentinel analytics rules are nothing more than queries. They're Kusto Query Language, or KQL queries that you're running. So here's the query that we're going to run as part of this here. But let's do this here. Let's go ahead and change our severity to medium as part of this process here. So we're going to run this query as part of this here. So at this point, we can do some testing. One of the worst things you can do is build a query and then think it works, and then you run it, and a few days later, a week later, you have no data. So we do give you the ability to build a query, but then over here on the right, to be able to test it. And it'll test your query to see if there's anything. Now, right now, we don't have anything, which is fine. But if you notice, I didn't get an error. And that's what I'm really looking for here is, were there any errors that were part of this here? Now, because this is a scheduled query rule, we're going to set the query to run, this rule to run every 5 minutes. By the way, the minimum you can do it is 5 minutes. The maximum is 2 weeks. So if I go in here and let's say put 2 minutes, I get an error. So a scheduled query rule, the minimum is every 5 minutes, the max is every 2 weeks. If you want to run it more frequently than every 5 minutes, then you would have to create that near real-time query, the NRT query rule. That one runs every 2 minutes and it's hard-coded. And in here, let's look at the previous day. So we're going to look at everything from a day back up to now in our rule itself, in our query that we're building as part of this here. So those are the settings that we're going to set as part of this here. So at this point, let's go ahead and go to our incident settings. So yes, I do want it to create an incident within Sentinel. So I can turn that on. If you don't want an incident created, you can disable that as part of this process here. And then what we're going to do at this point is we're going to go next. And we're going to create an automated response. So notice here, there is an automated response. There's my playbook that I created earlier. So what's going to happen here is if this analytics rule, which runs every 5 minutes, finds something that matches this query right here, if it finds something that matches this query, it is automatically going to run this playbook, this automation rule that I've defined here. So it's going to run that. So let's go ahead and save this. So now we have a new Cloud Shell user rule configured. So now if something triggers this, it'll automatically open up an incident. That incident will show up here in our incident section. And because I have an automated response enabled for it, it'll automatically respond based on my playbook. So that's the process that we have. So now let's edit a new rule. So let's kind of walk through this process again here. So we're going to go through take our Cloud Shell user and let's go ahead and edit it. And in here, we're going to keep all the default stuff for the first page. But for our second page here, I can go in here and I can make changes if I want to here. But let's make this, if you want to make it, you can make it every 5 minutes or more. As we mentioned, you can change it. I can change the period of data that we're going to look at. So let's look at the last 2 days or last 3 days that we have. So you can do that if you want to. By the way, the error is based off of the time frame. So you have to play around with the time here as part of that process. So now what we're going to do is we're going to continue on here and select next under incident setting. Now for our automated response, we're going to keep all of that the same. And then we have our store. So what I want to do here, this is my automated response. What I want to do here, we're going to modify this and we're going to add a new process here. So what this process is going to do, we're going to call it tier 2. What I want is whenever this analytics rule finds something, not only do I want it to respond, but I also want it to go in and automatically assign it to, let's say to me. Let's say I'm working in the tier 2 team. So I'm going to go in and say, this is the name, the trigger. So the trigger for this is going to be basically what we already have in place, but the action. For the action, I'm going to say assign an owner. And the owner that we're going to assign in this case is going to be my lab user account. So me in this scenario. So now what will happen is, and let's kind of talk about this. If my analytics rule finds something based on the query, it's going to open up an incident in Sentinel, but it's also in my automated response going to launch this playbook and also assign that incident automatically to me. So that's the process that we have as part of this here. So let's go ahead and save this. We're going to review and create and then save it. So now that we've got the analytics rule created, we've got automation configured. Let's go ahead and trigger this rule. So to trigger this, we're going to open up PowerShell. And in here, we're going to mount it to our storage account here. By the way, if you're following along at home and you're going to be doing this lab, make sure that you do not select the option for no storage account required, because it will not trigger a rule, an event in the log. So we want to mount the storage. This is going to be a very important piece. And we're going to apply this here. And when it asks us here, what do we want to use? We'll create a storage account for you. It's perfectly fine. It's going to create the storage account. Now, this is doing a few things. It's authenticating into the portal. It's going to create the storage account, which is going to generate some activity in our activity log, which is what we want. All right. So now it's gone in and it's created the storage account for us. It's opening up a session for us in PowerShell. We'll wait for this to connect to the terminal. So now you can see that it did authenticate me right here. So we're in. So what I want to do now is let's take a look at the logs themselves. So we're going to go into the Azure activity log here. And I'm going to close PowerShell. We no longer need that. And there are a few things that we're going to look for here. The first thing I want to look for is list storage, list storage account keys. I'm just going to do list storage account. And it'll generate the logs as part of our process here. Now, if you don't see this up front, then it just may be it hasn't updated yet fully, but eventually it will show the log entries in here as part of this here. So that's one of them. The second one that we're going to look for here is update storage account create. In this case here, because we just created a storage account for it. And there it is right there. So there's our update storage account create. So this was triggered because we just created a new PowerShell session for the first time. So now, by the way, if you don't see these, you can refresh your screen. They will pop up. There's our update and there's our list storage account key option, the two we were looking for. They're now showing up here. So now that we've got this, what has happened is, remember, every 5 minutes, our analytics rule, let's go back to our analytics rule. We've got an analytics rule that's looking for specific things. So it's looking based off of this query. So what's going to happen is the connector that we have a connector configured to pull the Azure activity logs. It's going to pull those logs from Azure Activity. It's going to put them into our log analytics workspace, which Sentinel sees. And then in that 5 minute window, because we have our analytics rule running every 5 minutes, so we have it running every 5 minutes here. So in about, give or take 5 minutes, the analytics rule is going to scan the log analytics workspace. And it's going to find a match based on that query. And the rule says, if you find a match, create an incident. So it's going to create an incident for us in the incident page, which will be here. So it will create an incident for us. And then once it creates the incident, you'll also notice that it's automatically going to assign the incident to me, my lab user account. So we're going to refresh this here and we'll wait for this. It could take up to 5 minutes again, because that's how often our rule queries this. So let's give it a second here and then we'll take a look at the results.
Violet did because she's had a one night stand. Violet, yeah, after dinner, I have and got a such a trans
So now that we've gone in and we've created analytics rules, we've configured the automation, we've actually gone in and triggered one of these automation rules. Now we're going to go and look at an additional feature that we have, which we've discussed, which is user entity behavior analytics. And we're going to take a look at that. And if you think about this, this is very useful because in every organization, we're not looking necessarily at just external threats, but what about internal threats? That we have disgruntled employees or just, errors and omissions of people making mistakes. How can we protect our organization, our environment based off of that? So we're going to look at another feature here, which is exploring entity behavior. And in here, what we're going to do is we're going to go into our log analytics, our Sentinel environment, and we're going to go into our settings. And within our settings, what we're going to do is we're going to go in and we're going to enable UEBA, User Entity Behavior Analytics. So we're going to go ahead and turn this on here. And then it tells us that we need to be a global administrator or security administrator to perform these functions here as part of this process. Now, what we would do at this point is we would go in. If you do have that right, you would then essentially check the boxes for the features that you want to enable as part of this, and then you would save it. So that's the process that you would use in order to use user entity behavior analytics. So just keep in mind that this is already this does require that you have elevated permissions to be able to do that as part of that here. So now let's take a look at an attack occurring. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a simulated attack. We're going to set up the infrastructure for that. So that way you can see how Sentinel can respond to that. So what we're going to do is we're going to switch over to one of our other servers here. I've got a Windows server here. that I'll be using. And in this Windows server, what we're going to do is the first thing we need to do is we need to install the Azure Arc Agent. I've already downloaded the Azure Arc Agent, but we need to actually do the installation for it. So what we're going to do is we're going to run this script here. And what this script does is it's going to go in and it's going to install install and configure the Azure Arc Agent so Azure can monitor and manage this system here. So we're going to go in here. It's going to open up an authentication window. I'm going to use my credentials to authenticate here. And it'll give me a page, which it says right here, authentication complete. So now I can go back to PowerShell, and it's going to continue on with this installation process here. So now the Arc Agent installation has been completed, which is important. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go in and we're going to verify that the agent was installed successfully. So we're going to do a Arc Management AZC management show is the command. And down here, you'll see that it does show that the Arc Agent is, everything's running properly here. So we're good to go as part of this process here. So now what we're going to do now is we're going to connect a non-Azure virtual machine. So what we're going to do is we're going to go in, let's go back to our other machine here. And we're going to go stay in the Azure portal. We're going to go to Sentinel, which we're already in Sentinel here. And then we're going to go to our data connectors section here. And we talked about data connectors in our last modules videos. We did the labs for this. But the data connector that we're looking for here is going to be the Windows Security. So we're going to look for the Windows Security connector, the AMA agent, which is fine. We're going to open up the connector page for that. And we're going to create a new data collection rule. Why? Because now that we've installed the Azure Arc Agent on that other server, that on-prem server, we can now go in and capture data. So we'll just call this AZWin DCR. We're going to keep the subscription in the resource group. But what I should be able to do now is drill down and see my Win server. This is my Arc-enabled server. So we're going to go ahead and select that. We're going to collect all security logs. You can limit what security logs are captured if you want to. And we're going to go ahead and create that. So now what I've done is I've got a server, a simulated on-prem server that is now being monitored and managed and up to a certain point by Azure using that Azure Arc Agent. So now let's go ahead and simulate these attacks. That way we can see the results from this query that we're looking for. So what we're going to do is we're going to switch over to our other server, and we're going to use this server to generate some attacks. So we're going to go in and we're going to open up a command prompt here. And we're going to create a new directory called temp. And now we're in that temp directory, and we're going to add a registry key. So we're going to do a reg add command, which is going to give us the ability to go in and modify that registry key. Let's go back in here and do this again. There we go. So let's go ahead and run that registry key there. For some reason, it didn't like it last time, but that's okay. So now it added that registry key in here, which basically is the beginning of the attack that we have. So now what we're going to do, and this is an example of establishing persistence in here. So now what we're going to do is we're going to use a second type of attack, which is privilege escalation. So we're going to create a new user here. The new user is going to be called the user name of Todd. And then what we did is we went in, so we created a new user, the username Todd to add in this case here, and then /add. And then we did a net user and set the password for it. So the password is that right there. And then what we did is we added that user to the administrators group, which is this command here. So that's the problem. It looks like my last command here did not run properly. So let's take a look at this here. There we go, because it ran it twice. There we go. So now it added that user to the administrators group. So this would be an example of a privilege escalation tag. So now let's go through this again. We're going to open up Notepad in this, or I should say PowerShell in here. And what we're going to do is we're going to run a script. So yes, we want to create a new file. So in here, what we're going to do is we're going to generate a malicious file. Okay. So we're going to save this file. And then what we're going to do is we're going to run this file. So let's go ahead and run this file here. Now, if you notice here, the error, this is perfectly fine for this. This is expected here. But what we're doing here is we're essentially going in and trying to attack DNS. So this is another type of attack that we've created here. So now that I've gone in and I've generated some log entries, so you see here it's still running. Now let's go back to the other machine that we were on. And we're looking at the KQL query here. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go in and we're going to see if it has generated data. Now keep in mind, this may take a few minutes for it to appear, but eventually it will. So notice here, it's showing events that have occurred. So this is data that was found in our log analytics workspace as part of this. So we're looking for temp/startup.bat. So now let's run a few additional queries here to see some additional results. So in this case here, we're going to look in our security event table. In that table, we're looking for anything that starts with 4688, dealing with the registry, or a command line that starts with reg. So we're going to go ahead and run this here. And again, some of this stuff may show up, some of this stuff may not. By the way, this is a great error to get. We talk about this in our KQL video, but I'm going to bring it up here. Notice here the error that I'm getting. My syntax is correct, but you have to understand how KQL works. Notice here the reg is highlighted because I inadvertently did this with my mouse as I was ready to click run, but this is great because you can see what happens here. In Azure, when you're running KQL queries, whatever is highlighted is the part of the command that's going to run. And because that's highlighted and that's not a valid command, it gave me an error. So to fix this, I'm going to remove, and in this case, remove the highlight just from reg and run it across everything. And now you'll notice it generates errors. So if you ever come across that, be careful if you have something highlighted or where your cursor is, because it could generate errors, even if it's a legitimate command that we have. So now you see that the command has generated some results for us that we have. So let's go and continue this here. And let's run another query. And in this one here, similar, but now we're looking for time generated. We want the computer's custom entity name, and so the subject username. So we want some additional things. So let's go ahead and run this. And you'll notice now that it does it. There's my host custom entity, which is right there. I also have my account name, account type, as well as some additional fields here going to the left. So it did find some entries in there based on the attack that we did. So now that it's in our log analytics workspace, now let's go ahead and create a new alert rule. So that way we can catch these type of events happening in the future. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into our log analytics page, and within our logs, and we won't save that. Within our log analytics page here, what we're going to do is we're going to create a brand new rule. So we're going to create a schedule query rule. And the rule name, we'll call it startup reg key. For a description, we'll say we're looking for something specific here. The severity level, we're going to make this a high severity level. And then for persistence, or for tactics, we're going to make it persistence here. So then we're going to go into our rule logic button. And what we're going to do is we're going to run the query that we created earlier. Now we're going to go in and we're going to run this query. as part of that process here. So we're going to run that query. And if I wanted to, I could actually run the other query also. And we can do a test run to see if we want that. So we can run both of those. For now, we'll just do run one here. So that's the query that we're going to run. We're going to run it every 5 minutes. And I want to look back at, the last day's worth of data. So we're going to say for the last day, we're going to look for all of the data that's occurred within there. And let's go ahead and do a test here to see if it generates anything. What I'm looking for here is to make sure there's no errors, which there are no errors, which is great. So now that I know that there's no errors, let's go to our incident settings. I want it to automatically create an incident for me. For my automated response, we'll keep the default that we have in here. But if I want to, I can add an additional one. So we're going to add a new one in here. And we're going to call this automation rules startup reg key. And when an incident is created, what do I want to occur? So let's go ahead and have it run a playbook. And if you remember that playbook from earlier, we're going to have it run that playbook as part of that process here. And then we're going to apply this. We're going to save this. And then we're going to let it verify. So validation passed, and we're going to save it and create it. So now I have a new rule set up in here that's going to look for any registry key changes. So now that I have this rule set up and it's going to run every 5 minutes, it should detect, it's going to scan the log analytics workspace. And because there's an entry in there, so if we go back to our query from earlier here, our KQL mode. So because I ran this query earlier here, it did detect some information. So what should happen now is our query, it's going to generate something based off of this. We should get an incident that's created, and then the automation process will kick off as part of this here. So now let's see if the incident is created already here. And there it is. There's our start. It generated an incident based off of this here. So it did create it. And I can look at the details of that event if I want to. And it gives me all the data related to that there. Let's go ahead and get out of this here. So you see, it's a high severity level because that's what I told it to be. I didn't configure it to automatically assign an owner, but it can if it needs to here. It does tell me here's the analytics rule that generated this. It's a persistence attack. And then I can get more detailed information if I need to related to it here, as well as if there were any entities assigned or associated with it, I can see those also. So that's a process that you would use to create an analytics rule. So let's do one more as a demonstration so you can see this. So what we're going to do in this next one, let's go back to our logs here. And we're going to go back into our KQL mode here. And we're going to remove the one that we currently have here. And we're going to do a quick search. So we're going to search for administrators within here. So we're going to look at this data here. There it is. So it generated and identified, in this case here, summarize count. How many times did it find an instance of administrators? That's what we're looking for. And then it showed us a count of 4. So that's an example of one that you can use. So let's go ahead and run another query here. So our second query, we're going to look for event ID 4732, and we're looking for built-in administrators. So let's go ahead and launch that. This one may be still relatively new, so there may be nothing for it here. I can also always change my time frame for when I'm running the query to a further out time to see if it'll generate anything, but it's still relatively new. But this will look for event ID 4732, dealing with basically the local administrator account. It'll search for that. The final query that we can run is this one here. And again, to understand how KQL works, watch our KQL module and the videos related to that, and we definitely break it down for you. So here's our final query here. And again, if there's any data, it will show that. Again, this is still relatively new, but it will show something eventually if you let it sit long enough here. But for all of these queries, you can create analytics rules for. Again, it's good to go into the log section to run the query to test it out. And then once you get the results you want, then you want to go into your analytics section and you want to create a brand new query for it. So again, whether it's a scheduled or near real time, we'll do a near real time for this one here, which means it's going to run every 2 minutes. So the name of this query is going to be security event, local administrator, user ad. I can put a description in there if I want to. We're going to make this a severity level of high, and the tactic or technique that we're going to be using, that we're looking for here, is going to be privilege escalation. And then we specify the rule logic. The rule logic would be your KQL query. So let's go ahead and put this query in here. So we're going to look for this here. To look for, actually, let's get rid of that there. We're going to look for this query, this rule here. Again, these are all rules that we created earlier, that we tested earlier, that you can run. For this one, notice here there's no time period because it runs every 2 minutes. So you do not get the option to specify a schedule. We're going to have it open up a ticket for us automatically. And similar to the other one, if you want to create an automated response, then you can create an automated response. So let's go ahead and add one in here. We're going to call this security event, local administrators, user ad, similar to what we had. We're going to say when an incident is created, based on the defaults here, we're going to launch a playbook. And the playbook would be whatever playbook that you want to define as part of that. And then you would apply it, review it, and then save it. So now I've demonstrated how to create multiple analytics rules within your environment. And they will, depending on if you have the incident process enabled for the analytics rule, it will create the incident. And if you have auto assignment or any other logic configured, it will include all of that as part of the process here. So that's the process for analyzing it. Now, once an event has occurred, you can go into your incidents page, and within your incident, you can select the option for view full details here. And it gives you everything that you need to know about that event here. The severe, and some of this you can change if you want to, like the severity level, the status, or who it's assigned to. So you can automatically assign it to people if you want to, or manually. Here's a description, which we created as part of our analytics rule. It's looking within Sentinel. And then it gives me a bunch of different things. One nice thing that it does give you an incident page. So if you wanted to, you could share this link with other people where they can get access to it. If you don't want to give them direct access here, you can give them the link here. That's definitely welcome here. And then, of course, the details about the incident. Now, earlier we talked about creating playbooks and how playbooks can be launched automatically, which we saw. We used automations to automatically launch a playbook, but we can also manually launch a playbook. And to do that, in your incident page, if you go to your actions, there's an option here to basically run a playbook. So now I can run whatever playbooks that I have as part of that. And again, so I can go in here. Oops, and I did not mean to do that. But I can go in there and I can say, okay, let's go ahead and run a specific playbook. So let's go ahead and run this playbook here. And obviously the playbook would have to make sense for what you're doing, but it would launch that playbook and then kick off whatever process that you have as part of that. So hopefully you've enjoyed this demonstration. In here, the key things that you want to remember are analytics and automation. Automation is where you create your automated processes. You create your playbooks that you're going to use. And then once you've created the playbooks or the automation rules, you can then use those when you create the analytics process here. The analytics is how Sentinel, with analytics, you're telling Sentinel how to look for things and what to specifically look for. We do provide a bunch of templates that you can use as part of this, but you can also create your own. So here are all the different pre-built templates. By the way, you'll see more and more templates included in here as you install things from your Content Hub. A lot of times when you install solutions from your Content Hub, it will include some playbooks. So let me give you an example here. So if we go with the Cisco Umbrella, let's see. If we go with the Cisco Umbrella connector here, notice here, it includes 4 template playbooks that you can have. So as you add more content from the Content Hub, as you install more, you'll see more playbook templates that you can use. Thank you. Hopefully you enjoyed this demonstration, and we'll see you for the next one.
So this completes Learning Path 9. There are many ways to continue your learning journey. We encourage you to watch other videos in this course, or if you choose, search out your next favorite topic on the Microsoft Learn site. You can access that at aka.ms/learn. Thank you.